Today, I'm very happy to be joined by one of the most well-known sports writers in Texas. He's covered the NFL for 47 years at the Houston Chronicle, member of the Texas Sports Hall of Fame, of course, the General, John McClain. Honored to have you on the show, John. How are you doing today?
It's my pleasure, Monty. I'm happy to do it. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course, super glad to have you on. And we saw the Texans, they put on impressive performances 3 out of the last 4 weeks versus the Cowboys and the Chiefs, and then they beat the Titans in Tennessee for the second year in a row. But yesterday, they got beaten badly at home by the Jacksonville Jaguars, 31-13, ending their 9-game winning streak against the Jaguars. What do you think really changed in this game where the Texans just did not look great at all compared to some of their previous games?
I've been giving them good grades on my weekly report card for sportsradio610.com, and I just killed them after that game because it's the worst effort, the worst performance, and it came at the worst time. In my column for gallerysports.com, I ripped them a new one because they deserve it and I hope they don't screw up that first pick by beating Indianapolis and then having the Bears get it instead of the Texans. But I think it sealed Lovie Smith and his staff fate to get fired. It's almost inexplicable how you can have that kind of effort coming on the heels of those 3 impressive performances. And Lovie Smith's goal of trying to have the best record in the AFC South, that was all really they had to play for, although a lot of the fans think they have to play for a lot, which is the first overall pick so they can have their choice of quarterbacks. But it was very surprising that they put up that kind of effort.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. And they're playing the Colts next week. And personally, I'm not even sure if I honestly think they could go into Indianapolis and win that game. I mean, the Colts they haven't been looking great at all recently. They're 4-11-1, and they lost 38-10 to the Giants, and Nick Foles got injured. The Colts are favored by 3 at home, but I personally wouldn't be surprised if they go in there and they beat Indianapolis. I mean, what do you think about that game, John?
I thought that there was a good chance they were going to beat the Jaguars. That game meant nothing for Jacksonville. They played the Titans in the last game in Jacksonville to win the AFC South. Doug Peterson, the coach, did a great job of getting his players to focus on that game. Lovie Smith did a terrible job of getting his players to focus on that game. And I looked up, despite how bad the Colts have been in their losing streak, they are still better than the Texans in offense, rush offense, passing, defense, rush defense, and pass defense across the board. And we're looking at 2 of the worst teams. The thing, if it was Nick Foles or Matt Ryan, I think that Texans had a better chance to win. But Sam Ehlinger is going to be playing against the Texans, and he's going to want to make a good showing for all his Longhorn fans who are going to be watching him. And when he came off the bench to replace the injured Nick Foles, he played pretty well. Now, the good thing for the Texans, they don't have to play Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor has killed them 3 games in a row. He's out for the year, just like Dameon Pierce. So I don't know what kind of running game they can muster, but I do know this. The Texans are capable of winning, but I'm hoping they lose and get that first pick.
Sam, I agree with you there. They need that number 1 pick. And, you mentioned a lot of people have been criticizing Lovie Smith, and rightfully so. I mean, this team, they're going to end up with a worse record than last season, arguably, even though they had more talent this year. And I just honestly think this Texans team could have ended up with easily around 6 wins if they played a lot better in those kind of close games, and if they were, better prepared. You had games against the Broncos, Bears, Colts, Raiders. You had a lot of games where I think it was a winnable game, and Pep Hamilton's play calling has not been good enough this year as well. Of course, the Texans, like you said, need to move on from them both. Who would be some candidates that I guess you have in mind?
I don't think it would be Sean Payton, because Sean Payton's going to require a first-round pick, and he would have to have total control of personnel like he had in New Orleans. Nick Saban is this week is his 2-year anniversary as the general manager. 2 years into a 6-year contract. They're not going to be firing him. He has it in his contract. He has control over all personnel decisions. So he's not going to be bringing in Sean Payton because he wants total control. Now, there's a report out on The Athletic that I just read on Pro Football Talk said Jim Harbaugh gets offered a job, he'll take it. Now, Harbaugh had a general manager, Trent Baalke, in San Francisco when they went to 3 championship games and they lost the Super Bowl to Baltimore. But I don't know. Maybe I don't know if he gets interviewed. Those 2 guys that are my favorites. Number one, DeMeco Ryans. And I say that because he's one of my all-time favorite players when he played 6 seasons for the Texans. He's the hottest coordinator. But DeMeco's only been a coordinator for 2 years. He's only known one organization as a coach, and that was the 49ers, and he's done a great job. Last year, he had 1 interview, turned down others, said, I need more seasoning. And he would be ideal for a guy like Nick Caserio because DeMeco doesn't have enough leverage to get control of personnel. So I would think he'd want to work with a proven personnel guy. The other guy is Shane Steichen, the offensive coordinator of Philadelphia. He's calling plays this season. Most coordinators don't call plays if the head coach is a coordinator. But Nick Sirianni let him do it. He was offensive coordinator with the Chargers when Justin Herbert was a rookie. Pep Hamilton's the quarterback coach. Pep did a really good job coaching Davis Mills as a rookie, but it looks to me like Pep's going to be spending his career as a quarterback coach and not as a coordinator. So those 2, DeMeco Ryans and Shane Steichen, are the 2 guys that I'm going to keep an eye on. Now, Jonathan Gannon, defensive coordinator of the Eagles, was interviewed last year. I know he liked him. And they also interviewed Jim Caldwell. They interviewed Joe Lombardi, offensive coordinator with the Chargers. A couple more like Hines Ward, but he's not a legitimate candidate. But they got to get this one right because this will be one and done for 2 coaches in a row. This will be their 5th head coach in 4 years, from Bill O'Brien, interim coach Romeo Crennel in 20, David Culley 21, Lovie Smith in 22. So whatever they do, they better get it right. If Caserio doesn't get it right, then he'll end up getting fired.
Yeah, I think you make some really great points here. DeMeco Ryans is someone that I would love to see with the Texans for sure. That's a guy at the top of my list. And, you mentioned it, and you mentioned Nick Caserio. I want to hear your thoughts on him and the job that he's done so far in the draft and overall as GM. I mean, there's some fans that think Caserio isn't even the answer. And you mentioned if he doesn't get this head coaching position correct, I think he might be gone. So what are your thoughts on the job that Caserio's done as a whole?
I think he's done a terrific job. I wrote an in-depth column at Gallery Sports 2 weeks ago for all the nincompoops that think he should be fired out. Would be preposterous based on what he got when he took over. Didn't have a 1 or 2, had a terrible cap situation that had to be cleaned up. They hadn't had a 1 the year before. He had the Deshaun Watson situation. He had David Culley was on his way to a 1 and done coach. It was a terrible situation. They win 4 games. I picked them to go 6-11 this season, and I was an idiot. I thought there's no way it'd be the under on the 4.5 over and under, but I was stunned that they've been this bad. They continue to have certain problems. Their offense is awful. Their running game's awful, even with Dameon Pierce. Now, he's going to miss these last 4 or 5 games. But even with him, the running game wasn't real good. It was him or bust. Caserio is going to have 11 draft choices. He'll have 2 number 1 picks. He's going to be able to spend some cap money, not just on guys for 1 or 2 year deals, but a couple of big timers that are going to cost money to fulfill needs, and they got a lot of them. And so I think this time next year is a more accurate barometer about the kind of job Nick Caserio has done as general manager.
Yeah, I agree. I think Nick Caserio has done a good job, and hope he can get this head coaching position right, and hope that he can do a great job in this draft. And with the loss on Sunday, the Texans clinch a top 2 pick, meaning there's a guarantee of Bryce Young or CJ Stroud available to choose from. What are your thoughts on those 2 QBs, and if given a choice, which one would you pick for the Texans quarterback?
I've watched both those quarterbacks as many times as I could this season, taped their games to watch them over and over. Now, I'll say this about the NFL draft prospect. when it all comes down to it, as we approach the draft, what a guy did in college doesn't mean squat. They just don't pay attention. They pay more attention to how they look in shorts and t-shirts, how they look at the combine, how they look at Senior Bowl practices, how they look at their pro days and their private workouts, how they do in their interviews. And it's almost like they couldn't do any worse if they didn't have any of that. And all they had was game tape. And too often, I think they don't spend enough time focused on the game tape. They spend too much time with everything that happens in the postseason. Bryce Young, what he did in the Sugar Bowl against Kansas State, he's been doing for 2 years. This year, he didn't have the great skill position guys he had when he won the Heisman as a sophomore. And what CJ Stroud did against a much better defense in Georgia's, he hadn't done this year. He'd been great for a half, great for 3/4, but he was very streaky. And if Bryce Young were 2 inches taller, they list him at 6 foot and 190. I'm told he's closer to 5'10 and 185, but he can eat like crazy between now and the combine. He won't need to run. He'll say, look at the tape. Kyler Murray had that issue in which he ate a lot to get his weight up to 200, and his size hadn't been a problem. His problem has been he doesn't study enough of the game plans, and he blew out his knee without being touched. And he's super quick and super fast. Bryce Young doesn't move like he does. And other short quarterbacks, Bryce Young to me is the most comparable to Drew Brees because Drew was not real mobile. Young can run when he needs to, but Brees, who was 6 foot even coming out of the combine in 01 and everybody panicked, he was 6 foot. Michael Vick was 6 foot and 1/4. But Brees learned how to throw between tackles, throw on the run, throw sliding, throw left. Boy, Young's got great pocket presence. He's cool. He loves pressure situations. He's been going against the best competition for the last 2 years. He's been playing in sold-out stadiums everywhere he goes. People wonder, oh, boy, they get to the NFL, the crowds are going to be so loud and so big. No, they're not as big as the SEC, and they certainly aren't louder than the SEC. So if I had to pick one, and it would be Bryce Young, but they better have a coach, a play caller who knows how to coach a quarterback who is smaller, but is mobile, can play in the pocket or out of the pocket. Because if you don't, you're spinning your wheels.
Yeah, I 100% agree on that analysis of Bryce Young, and Texans fans want him to be the pick, and I think he has a lot of potential. Of course, he can use his legs when he needs to, and even though he's on the shorter side, I think I think he can, as long as he's coached properly, I think we might be able to see the full potential of Bryce Young in the NFL. So we'll see what they do. But is quarterback the top pick for you for the Texans, or would you even consider another position like Will Anderson or Jalen Carter at all, or would you just be focusing on quarterback at this point?
If you look around the league, you got to get your quarterback. You can't go with Davis Mills again. You can't hope that there's one of the two guys there at 10. You're going to have to trade. If Chicago gets that pick, teams are going to want to trade with Chicago. Then you're going to have to get in a bidding war. And Nick Caserio doesn't want to give up the Browns' first-round pick. He's going to have like 3 first-round picks because Miami had to sacrifice its pick. So there's 31 first-round picks, and if they pick 32nd overall, that's like having 3. But I want him to get the quarterback settled, and you fill in around him. Jalen Carter would be my first choice of a non-quarterback. Will Anderson would be number 2, best inside player, the best outside edge rusher. They're both big-time prospects, probably going to be rated ahead of the quarterbacks, although I think Bryce Young's going to end up being number 1. And they couldn't go wrong with either one of those guys or Young and CJ Stroud. You never know. The guy may go to the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, you never know. And it's going to be really interesting to see which direction they go in. And, I personally like CJ Stroud. I wouldn't mind if the Texans go in his direction, but obviously I think Bryce Young is a really good candidate for this team. And there are a couple of things that really stood out to me about the Texans this year, but I look at the defense that they have, and they obviously aren't ranked really great at all, but they play hard, and I like how they're building up this defense. They've had a couple of good performances this season. And Jalen Petrie really, to me, has been one of the few bright spots for this team, really, besides Damian Pierce. And I know you've had chances to cover Petrie in detail. Of course, he's a Baylor guy drafted in the second round. Had 5 interceptions this year as well, second most this season. And I think he plays really hard and made a lot of tackles this season. How do you think Jalen Petrie's been able to have such a strong impact so far?
He missed a lot of tackles this season, including
Yeah,
Sunday on Travis Etienne's
yeah,
62-yard run. He didn't miss those tackles at Baylor. He played around the line of scrimmage at Baylor. He didn't do that here very well. They moved him back to free safety, and he's played really, really well. He's been their best rookie. I feel like if Derek Stingley Jr. had been in a man coverage scheme, we'd have seen more of him making plays. But when you're a zone a lot and you drop back, unless they throw the ball over there and you break on the ball, then you're not going to be making big plays. And Petrie's more of a flashy player. But the fact is, secondary played better than the rest of the defense. Didn't have a great pass rush. They've only given up 12 touchdown passes, fewest in the NFL, and their opponent's passing rating is in the top 10. And they've done it without a great pass rush. And Christian Harris has also showed a lot of promise at linebacker. He missed first half of the season with injuries. Coaches are pumped about him next season. Ogbo Okoronkwo came on since he was made a starter over the second half, had his 5th sack Sunday. He's been a starter now for 7 games, and 6 of them he's had a sack. He's been really good. He's undersized. Jonathan Grenard's going to the last year of his contract. He's been hurt too much the last 2 years. Those guys going into the last year of their contract sometimes have a knack for staying healthy. So I expect Jonathan to play. And if he plays, he can be a double-digit sack guy. They got Jerry Hughes back for another season. He had one against the Jaguars, which broke a streak of 5 consecutive games without one. He's got 9 overall. They need another good defensive tackle to go with Malik Collins. And boy, Jalen Carter would fill that bill. But man, you don't want to see. I don't. Now maybe Nick Caserio's thinking, you know what? I'll sign Jared Stidham. I had him. He and I are friends. He's a free agent. Or you know what? I'm going to sign Jimmy Garoppolo, and we'll use those first 2 picks on position players besides the quarterback. It'd be very exciting if he could get Quentin Johnston, a great receiver from TCU, with Cleveland's pick, and Carter, Will Anderson at the top. And, it'd be hard to argue with that. But still, I want a rookie quarterback that's like the Texans' baby. They're going to watch him grow. They're going to burp him. He's going to stumble. He's going to fall. He's going to make mistakes. He's going to drive you crazy. But he's your baby, and he's going to grow, and you're going to be proud of him. I would rather see that than some guy that comes in here, a veteran like Garoppolo or Carr, somebody like that, where they might need another one in 2 years.
Yeah, I agree. I think you should go quarterback this year, but it's going to be interesting to see what decision Caserio makes, whether he wants to wait on quarterback until later and draft Jalen Carter or whatever the case may be. There are a lot of really interesting options in the draft. You can get a receiver with Cleveland's pick. So I'm interested to see how Caserio chooses his players and how he chooses to build up this team further. And really excited to see how the Texans move on from here. But we saw J.J. Watt, arguably one of the greatest Houston Texans of all time, the legend. He retired this past week, and just want to hear from you your experiences with JJ and what really made him really special.
I was glad to see JJ get a sack Sunday. That gave him 10.5.
Yeah.
I'll be presenting him for the Hall of Fame in 2028. I feel like he's a lock as a first ballot inductee. And I wrote a long column last week on gallerysports.com about stories about JJ. You can look up stats. Only stat I figured was the 4-year period where it was his second through his 5th season when he won 3 NFL Defensive Player of the Year awards. I looked up his sacks and compared it to the greatest pass rushers I've ever seen: Reggie White, Lawrence Taylor, Aaron Donald, and Bruce Smith. And his 4 years was more than all of them. And then I looked at his 6 best years, and that wasn't counting a Sunday's game, the last game. And the only one that had more over a 6-year period was Reggie White. And those are stats I'll be using when I make my presentation for him to the Hall of Fame. But one of the things I liked about him was all the things he did away from football for people. And I've had people say, is JJ Watt a phony? Nobody could be that serious. Nobody could be that good. And this is one of the many stories I wrote. When he was a rookie in 2011, there was a lockout, so he couldn't come down here and officially join the Texans program. But I remember he came down here quite a bit, and the family that had the mom and dad who died in a car wreck coming back from Colorado, and the two little boys were paralyzed, and the daughter had broken bones. And it was a really big story that captured a lot of people's hearts, locally, nationally. And I remember reading a Chronicle story about all the celebrities and politicians and everybody had gone to visit the kids in the hospital. And way down the last paragraph said newest Texan JJ Watt. Didn't say who he was, what position, how he'd gotten there. So when the lockout ended, I went to him and I said, do you know the Berry family? Did your family know them? He said, no. He said, why? I said, well, I noticed you were going to visit them. Why would you visit them if you didn't know who they were? He said, because I just wanted to see if there's something I could do to help or cheer them up. And so I wanted to go up there and introduce myself and take them things from the Texans. And he stayed really close with the Berry family. And I just thought that said so much about him to do it before he knew anybody here. And I remember him showing up at birthday parties unannounced. The kid from Ireland who wrote him after JJ went to Great Britain said, if you ever come back, here's my address, my parents' house, come see us. He did. And then he brought that family over here to watch a game. And there's so many things he asked me not to write because he said, it looks like I'm, tooting my own horn, and I'm not. And I said, okay. And the one that I like the most is it just blows me away. There was a little girl, probably about 6 or 7 years ago, and her mother found her crying one day and said, why are you crying? She said, I want to marry JJ Watt, and I'm not going to be able to marry JJ Watt. I guess she's like 7 or 8 years old. I can't remember. So mom recorded it and put it on social media. Somebody got it to JJ. So one day, the parents loaded up their kids in a car, went over to NRG Stadium, told them they were going to buy tickets to a concert, and they all walked up there. And instead of going to the ticket office, they went into the lobby. And there's JJ with his jersey as a wedding dress, and a PR guy, Nathan Edwards, holding up his laptop. He hits a button. Here comes the bride, started playing. JJ got down on one knee, asked her to marry him, picked her up, danced around the room with her wearing his jersey like they just got married while the parents sobbed. And I just, who does that? Nobody does that. A lot of players do a lot of great things. And I asked JJ, why do you do so much in the community? He said, because I'm single. I don't go to bars. I don't go to clubs. And I don't want to just lay around on my sofa watching Sports Center. I can do that when I get married. So I want to do as much as I can in the community that maybe I can bring a little inspiration for people. And he certainly did.
Yeah, 100% agree. Those are some really amazing stories about JJ, and I'm just so impressed with what he does for the community. Of course, raising all that money for Hurricane Harvey, and luckily I had the chance to tell JJ, how much that I've never seen an athlete do what he does, and he's very, very humble, really great guy, and just I'm so happy to see him get honored, hopefully back here in Houston, and he's just a really great guy. So amazing job by JJ. And I quickly want to ask you before we head out, just I want to ask you what your Super Bowl prediction would be right now. Obviously, I think the NFC race is wide open. Got a lot of teams there who could possibly come out of the NFC. But who do you think would be your pick right now?
Cincinnati's hot.
Yeah.
But other than New England one time, no loser's been back to the Super Bowl since Buffalo lost 4 in a row in the early 90s. So I'm not picking the Bengals. The Chiefs and the Bills, whichever one gets home field advantage. Sean McDermott has not won a playoff game as the Bills head coach on the road. The first one, I think he lost here to Deshaun Watson in overtime. So they need to play at home where they're 14-1 in their last 15 home playoff games. Kansas City, it seems like, has home field advantage every year. If the Chiefs got to play the Raiders in the last game, so they should win.
Mhm.
And if Cincinnati has beaten Buffalo, then the Chiefs are going to get home field advantage. So I'm going with the Chiefs versus the 49ers because I want to see your classic offense led by Patrick Mahomes, and I want to see your classic defense led by D'Amico Ryans and the player who's going to be NFL Defensive Player of the Year, Nick Bosa. I think it'd be old-fashioned football, offense versus defense. As far as the winner, I never pick against the Chiefs with Mahomes and Andy Reid there.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think that's a really, really good pick. And I think that would be a really fun game for sure. So that's going to be really interesting to see. And, as for the NFC, I think there are a lot of teams out there, but what do you think about the Cowboys? I mean, they're looking like they might go 13-4 and they'd have to play the Buccaneers in the first round. What are your thoughts on how far they could possibly go?
Well, Philadelphia loses 3 in a row. Cowboys going to win the division.
Yeah.
I'm still stunned that the Eagles didn't win one with Gardner Minshew,
Yeah.
replacing the injured Jalen Hurts. We don't know for sure if Hurts is going to play in this last game against the Giants. That doesn't mean squat for the Giants.
Yeah.
Now, I think they're going to try to win, but it still doesn't mean anything. It means everything for the Eagles if they could get not only a division, but they get home field advantage, and that would send the Cowboys to Tampa. And up until the last 2 weeks, I said, who wouldn't want to play the Buccaneers and Tom Brady? They've been terrible. Then Brady he engineered a comeback victory 2 weeks ago, 432 yards, no interceptions, 3 touchdowns to Mike Evans on Sunday. They won the worst division in the NFL, so I'm not so sure if Dallas goes to Tampa, they could win that game. But the Cowboys haven't been in the Super Bowl. This is another column I wrote on Gallery Sports last week. It seems like they haven't been in the Super Bowl since Nixon was president, but in truth, it's only been like 26 years.
Yeah, it's been a long time, and we'll see if they can do something different this year. But John, really appreciate the time. One last question here for you. Had a really incredible journey and career covering the NFL for so many years. What I guess really just stands out to you the most about how you're able to reach the position that you're in? Because I'm just starting my journey into sports media, and that hopefully one day I can be in a position that you are in right now. But what I guess stands out to you about your journey?
First of all, I've been blessed. I haven't worked a day since I left Waco, and I mowed yards. And it's who you know. I met a guy named Tony Peterson who helped me get hired at the Waco Tribune Herald going into my junior year at Baylor. Then he came to the Chronicle, and after I worked there for 4 years and graduated, I came to the Chronicle to cover the original Arrows with Gordy Marty and Mark Howe. Tony recommended me for that. And then when he got to be the sports editor, he put me on the Oilers. So I owe him so much, and so many other people that I've been friends with. Hard work. What happens is you network with everybody you can, and you do everything you can, and it's who you know. And once you get your foot in the door, that's when your work ethic takes off. And you want to be knowledgeable. You want to have people to say about you, that man, that guy works hard. And you don't have to tell him when he makes a mistake 2 times. And you want to be respected. I've always thought you get more with sugar than vinegar. If I have to use vinegar, I will. But if I can make a point with sugar, I'll do it, because I don't think you need to try to intimidate people. You don't try to bully them or scare them. To me, all we've got today, every statistic can be found on the internet. The only thing you cannot find is our credibility and our opinion. And when I retired from the Chronicle, and Mattress Mac hired me for GallerySports.com and made me his full-time columnist, and I thought, I got to write about the Astros. I'd never written about a champion in Houston. Closest I came was the Love You Blue Oilers, then the Run and Shoot Oilers. And I wrote one time 8 straight columns about the Astros during the playoffs and World Series. And I had so much fun. I feel like I've been reborn. And I can't wait until the Rockets finally turn it around, the Texans finally turn it around. And I can't wait for spring training.
Yeah, 100% agree. Can't wait for the Astros season to resume. And, thank you so much for the time today, John. Really Appreciate it. Had a great time talking with
I'll
you.
be happy to do that. It's my pleasure. Thank you very much. Let's do it again. Happy New Year.
Yeah, thank you so much, John. Happy New Year. Thank you.